Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today we're going to be taking an in-depth look at the Kizer Dorado. As you can see, I have a bunch of different versions here, and we're going to use all of them and discuss all of them in this, what I'm going to call the definitive Kizer Dorado review. And I call it definitive because I have every version here and we'll be able to talk about every available aspect of this knife, so that if you're looking at this wondering if this knife is for you, you'll definitely have the answer by the end of this video. Now, the other thing that we'll be able to talk about is some of the differences between the Vanguard and Bladesmith series, and even some differences between larger and smaller knives. Okay, so all that stuff is going to be in here. Before I go into that, I just want to offer a little reminder that I do have a Sharp Stuff Facebook page, and what I use it for is mostly just some updates, ask some questions to the community once in a while, but really it's there because YouTube has been doing all this crazy stuff, and I just want to know that should the channel just vanish from existence for some unknown reason, at least I have a way to reach out to some of you and kind of let you know what's going on and where to find me and all that kind of stuff. So just wanted to put that out there since there's been a few new subscribers. I wanted to let you all know about that. Let's go ahead now and get into the full discussion of the Kizer Dorado. So we have here the large size Vanguard series blue striped G10 stainless steel liner lock VG10 steel. Over here we have the mini limited run titanium frame lock M390 with a stonewash finish, and yeah, M390 on the blade steel. And then we have the standard Bladesmith series, except for the skull on the handle, which is a feature that I'm not that crazy about, but nonetheless, there it is. And this is S35VN with a stonewash finish. Now, let me say right off the start that this is not a knife that I find very visually appealing. And so just to kind of show some consolidarity, guys, I'd love to hear down below, what's a knife that you kind of, and I will admit, guys, this is a good knife, okay? Honestly, I kind of wanted to hate it because I just look at it and think that is about the dumbest looking thing I've seen. But I'm like, for review, I've got to carry it, I've got to use it, so I started doing that. And I have to admit that in reality, this is a really good knife. It performs exceptionally well. It slices, it cuts, it's comfortable in hand, it's really comfortable in hand. So lots of things that I really, really like about it, but I still can't get over the look. So I'd love to hear the knife that kind of fits that role for you guys down below, that you go, this has got to be one of the ugliest knives ever, but the stupid thing works, and so I use it. Okay, and that's really the category that this knife falls into. I gotta say, I kind of wanted to hate this knife, but in the end, as I review it, this is going to be a fairly positive review, except I will say I didn't magically start liking the looks of the knife. I still think it's pretty ugly, but I have to admit that it's well built and very effective as a cutting tool. So let's go ahead and get started here, beginning with the Vanguard series. So this knife is 8 and how big is it? 7/16 overall. Okay, so 8 and 7/16, just a hair under 8.5 inches, 3.5 inch blade, 4 and 7/8 handle, and that's just like a hair over 4 and 7/8. And this guy weighs 4.9 ounces. So 4.9 ounces on the Vanguard series knife. Now the same numbers, okay, apply to this guy. Again, 4 and 8 and wow, 4. Let's try 8 and 7/16, 3.5 inch blade, 4 and 7/8 handle, but it does weigh exactly 1 ounce more at 5.9 ounces. So 5.9 ounces instead of the 4.9 of the Vanguard. And then of course we've got the little guy. And of course, this is going to be much smaller. It's 7 and 1/8 inches overall, 3 inch blade, and 7 and 1/8 inch handle. And it weighs in at a very lightweight 3.48 ounces. So no big surprise there. It's going to be lighter than the other two. Now, in terms of carry, all of these carry pretty well. They're kind of rounded and smooth enough that they go in and out of pocket quite nicely. Of course, the small one takes up very little space in pocket and is thinner and lighter and smaller in every dimension than the larger ones. So obviously, and really, with a smaller knife like this, you hardly need to have a conversation about how well it carries, because of course a knife this small is going to carry extremely comfortably and really disappear in the pocket. What we're really worried about more are the larger ones, so I'll set this guy up here for a second. And these guys, you know, this is a little hefty and you kind of know that it's there. They're both about 1/2 inch thick. They both have the rounded contoured handles, which makes them slide in and out of pocket pretty nicely, and the pocket clips work really well. So even though this guy especially is a little heavy, they actually carry pretty well, and I can't really, you know, I can't take away any points for being uncomfortable in pocket. Both of them work out quite nicely. All right, and of course, now that you know the size and weights on all these, you'll probably have some preferences of your own that will have an impact on, you know, what you think about those knives. So let's go ahead and talk now about the blade. Obviously, there'll be some similarities and some differences. The blade on this guy is VG10, and it's obviously a satin finish. This guy has S35VN with a stonewash finish, and here we have M390, again with the stonewash finish. Now, you know what I would say is here, good, better, best type of thing. VG10 is not a favorite steel of mine, but it's certainly adequate, and Kizer seems to do a pretty good job with it. I've had a few Kizers in VG10, and they tend to hold their edge quite nicely. I can't really complain too much about VG10. It is a fairly stainless steel, and I do like the way they finished it. I do prefer satin, and here's one of the reasons. You know, if you look at these two blades side by side, you know, the satin just has that nice, the look of the nice grind lines. You can really see the hollow grind quite nicely. The S35, yeah, the stonewash kind of washes away some of the contours in the blade and takes away some of the visual interest of a blade. And I think that generally is how it works. A stonewash, to me anyway, diminishes sort of the visual appeal of most blades. Finishes aside, how about the performance? Well, this is one of the things that really got me with this knife. The blade is, you know, sort of a modified clip point with a hollow grind and a fairly steep recurve, which gives it lots of belly out here. Here's the thing, guys. I don't want to like this blade shape. I really think it looks bad, but it cuts really well in actual use, and I put quite a bit of use on this just because, you know, I was honestly inclined to dislike it. So I thought, you know what, I better give it a fair shake, and I tried using it for a bunch of different jobs, and a recurve, I was reminded again that a recurve is very effective at cutting stuff. It just, and this blade is super thin behind the edge, so it slices extremely well, and the blade stock is not super thick. So some knives where you've got a really thick blade stock and then a hollow grind, you get sort of an abrupt edge right here. This one doesn't do that. It slices wonderfully. It's a great knife for actually cutting things. And you know, as much as I don't really love the way this blade looks, I have to say the performance is really nice. Now, the 3.5 inch is obviously what I preferred to carry. When I was carrying the 3 inch, I usually combined it with something else, either another Dorado, and I think I probably posted some pics into Instagram where I had both of these or both of these, I can't remember which. Anyway, the 3 inch does limit you a little bit. You know, if you're cutting an apple for your kid or something like that, you may not have enough reach to cut all the way across an apple or a tomato if you use your knives for food. Otherwise, though, for your typical EDC task, opening packages, cutting cardboard, all that stuff, the 3 inch is fine, and these do cut cardboard like lightsabers. They, you know, the hollow grind, they're thin behind the edge, and that recurve just guides the material right into the middle there, and you just slice through like a demon. So very good performing blades, you know, even if I'm not a big fan of the particular blade shape on these guys. So I guess the last comment is, and probably most of you, if you're watching this, are fairly familiar. So VG10 is a fine sort of mid-grade steel. It's not going to be, you know, anything to rant and rave about, but it's going to be adequate for most EDC knives. S35VN is very good. It's sort of the updated version of S30V. Sometimes I debate. S30V tends to be a little harder, can be a little chippier, but sometimes I like that extra hardness. I don't know. And finally, M390, of course, which is a great steel, holds an edge really well, performs exceptionally in terms of all of that balance between, you know, edge retention and corrosion resistance and toughness and softness and you know, everything. M390 is a really, really well balanced steel, which is why it's kind of considered a super steel. So there we go, not kind of, but is considered a super steel. So there you go, guys. That's the blade, a very functional, if not exactly attractive blade, for sure. Now, moving on to lockup and deployment. Now here we're going to notice a few more differences. Obviously, a liner lock is not the same as a titanium frame lock, and this liner lock is well done, okay? It's nice and thick, and I've commented on this before. I think I talked about it when I did the 802 Horus review, but I like to see a nice thick lock, and this one definitely has it. And so, you know, if you're going to do a liner lock, you may as well get a nice thick piece of steel in there. By the way, the other thing that's a nice feature about this that is not happening on every Kizer Vanguard is the fact that these are nested liners. So again, very well done on the construction on the sort of bottom end version of this guy in the Vanguard series. The lock works really well. It's very solid. There's no play in any direction, which are all things that to me are really, really important. All right, so can't complain about anything along those lines. In terms of detent, it's quite good. It's not the strongest or stiffest detent I've ever had, but it's certainly strong enough that you can see there. I tried to go a little bit light on it, but basically if you break the detent on this knife, it is going to deploy, which is pretty much what we want to see. Now, obviously, guys, the Bladesmith series, the action is a little smoother. The detent might actually be a little bit softer. I don't know. You can see, though, the action is quite good, and that's a result of not just how good the pivot is, okay, and they're all bearing pivots, but it's not just how good the pivot is, it's also about, you know, the placement and size of the flipper tab and the weight of the blade and all of that. So both of the large ones deploy really, really well. The smaller guy is not quite as good, and that's largely because you can see it still flips well, but it doesn't flip with the same authority, and that's just because you're not getting as much inertia with that smaller blade as you are getting with the larger guys. All of them, of course, well, the two titanium frame locks have stainless steel lock bar insert, and I will say, even on the smaller knife, they've made the lock bar nice and easy to access, and that's a fail that I've seen on some small knives where a small knife that's also a frame lock or even a liner lock, because of the smaller size of the knife, can be a little tough to get your fingers in here, but they've done a really nice cutout and made this very, very accessible. So lockup and deployment on all three of these guys are very, very good. Obviously, guys, the Bladesmith series are a little smoother, a little more refined than the Vanguard series, and probably anyone who's tried the different Kizers would be able to kind of attest to that. Okay, and that's pretty well true across the board. The Vanguard series, they're nice, but sometimes you can sort of feel a little bit of that the motion in those bearings or whatever. So lockup and deployment, nice, fast, all flipper deployed. They're all nice and fast. They all work really well and have very, very solid lockup. And I've got to say, that seems to be something Kizer tends to get right. I have three Kizers here in front of you. I've got another one here, got another one here. I've got the Titanium Intrepid at home. I've had the Megatherium recently and a number of other Bladesmith Kizers, and I will say I've yet to have one with poor lockup and deployment. Okay, so I think they've kind of got that part pretty well nailed down. All right, so now that we've talked about lockup and deployment, let's go ahead now and deal with construction. The first one, again, we'll do the Vanguard series, and I will say I'm pretty impressed with the construction on this. Nested liners is always a really nice touch. You can see there that they are milled out to save some of the weight, okay, which again is very nice. Contoured G10, very comfortable in hand, extremely comfortable in hand, in fact. I'm kind of getting off topic here. I'm supposed to focus on construction. And you can see that it is very open with a couple of pillars there at the back. Moving on to this guy, of course, titanium frame lock, milled titanium clip, unlike the Vanguard, which just has a spring clip. Now back here, we've got a single pillar construction rather than the two pillars that we had on the Vanguard. And the other point of contact or assembly is just going to be the pivot up here. All right, typical Kizer pivot with that sort of swirl pattern. I'm not in love with it. I actually wish they'd kind of drop that and move to something else, but it's sort of their thing right now. And so, you know, what are you going to do? If you buy a Kizer, it's going to have that swirl pattern. If it's a deal breaker for you, you're going to have to pretty much skip most Bladesmith Kizers. Again, titanium frame lock, single pillar construction at the back, and then the pivot screw up at the front. All of these are fairly well put together. All of them, you know, the fit and finish is on point. Of course, at this price point, you know, these go for about 250 bucks. That's, you know, that's pretty well expected. You expect to have good fit and finish, good overall quality and all of that. On the Vanguard, where it's a little cheaper, it's a little more impressive because they have done a really nice job with this. There's nothing that you look at and go, yeah, they kind of missed out on that one. You know, there's no rough grind lines or anything like that. Everything is really well done. And again, expected on these guys and more impressive on the Vanguard. So, in terms of how these are all put together, I'm quite impressed with all of them. I will say one thing, only, well, let me not lie to you. See, only the Vanguard series is going to be swappable in the clip. The rest of them are going to be right side tip up carry only, so lefties are not going to love that probably. The other thing I've got to give some credit for is they've nicely rounded the little corners here on the relief cut. Even on the limited run, they kind of did it, not as well as the full size, but that does make the knife go in and out of pocket very, very well. And this milled titanium clip is quite well done, okay? So got to give some credit where credit is due for pulling off that milled clip really, really well. I think those are all the points we want to touch on about construction, and now I want to move to ergonomics. And this is a thing, guys, that has really, really impressed me with this knife. There's kind of this hill here on the back of the blade, and of course you see the, hold on, there we go, Cucchiara on the back there, and that actually gives a little bit of traction on the back of the spine, but really, really comfortable knives in hand. All of these are quite comfortable, and I've got to say, rather impressive when you're using them for any kind of, you know, serious cutting. They are all very, very well done in terms of how they fit your hand, how well you can grip them, and how effective that grip is when you're getting some, you know, really, you know, when you're really bearing down on something. That's where ergonomics really begin to be important, and all of these have done a great job with that. If I give you, I'll show you the small Intrepid, and just as a point of comparison, this is not nearly as comfortable in hand. I mean, it's fine, it's not uncomfortable, but it doesn't inspire the same confidence that the small Dorado inspires. Very, very good. This is one of the actual more comfortable small knives that I've seen, and I think part of that is because the handle is a little bigger than some smaller knives. So, very, very impressive. I really, you know, have got to say the biggest win for me on these knives is definitely the ergonomics. They're very, very comfortable. Now, let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. And I've tried to sort of do a combination here. Now, obviously we got a fair number of knives, so I'm probably gonna have to kind of pull some out of the way. So first off, let's give you the two full size here, and I'll show you a couple of common knives. So here is a Rat Model 1. You can see people are very, very familiar with that. And of course would be a close competitor to the Vanguard series. By the way, I would take the D2 over VG10 if given the choice. In this case, of course, you don't have the choice. All the Vanguards are in VG10. Here is a Para 2, also in S35VN, so kind of like that. And again, this is not what I would really consider a competitive knife to either one of these. This is much cheaper, this is much more expensive, but people are really familiar with the Para 2, so it should give you a good sense for size. And of course, you can see decent amount of blade length. That's one complaint I should have mentioned when we were talking about the overall construction of these guys. The blade to handle ratio to me is not stellar, and in fact open, you know, if you just kind of look at the full size especially, you know, the handle looks maybe bigger than it should. It looks out of balance just a little bit, which is one of the things, again, that as I said, that kind of puts me off, you know, loving this knife. There's a lot of design features that I'm just not nuts about. So here is, you know, another Chinese manufactured liner lock with G10. This is the Reich P105. Much, much cheaper. The steel, now here's the thing. Let's switch these guys out and put this up here. Similar colors, but I would take 14C28N over VG10. I do prefer it. Just in as a user steel, I just tend to like it quite a bit better. What else have we got here? Oh yeah, I already showed you the Kizer Intrepid. Okay, and you can see it's quite a bit smaller, but notice the cutting edge is almost the same. And so when we talk about blade to handle ratio, that's the point I'm making, where you're not getting a lot of cutting edge for a fairly large handle. You get the same amount of cutting edge here, even though it fits in that small space. Okay, so that's something I do think is maybe less than ideal. What else have we got? Oh, this is a good comparison. Sorry. This is the only ZT I have in my collection right now, but I wanted to bring it in here because, you know, ZT, frankly, if you are liking, you know, high-end titanium frame locks, generally speaking, I think ZT is the way to go. They're offering quite a bit of value, really interesting designs, and believe it or not, this knife is actually cheaper than this knife, which to me is completely mind-blowing. All right. Let's see, what else have we got here? Oh yeah, recently reviewed Real Steel 802 Horus. Let's pull this guy back in. Again, it's more in comparison with the VG10 than it is the titanium frame lock down here at the bottom. But again, you can see another fairly budget-friendly option with decent steel, contoured G10, stainless steel liners, so it kind of fit in the same category there. Let's see here. Let's pull this guy out of the way and get the small guy in here, and I'll pull in just the Para 2 as so you can get another good sense for that. So there's the Para 2. Now here's one frustrating thing. The small Dorado at only 3 inches has almost, now it's not quite there, but almost as much cutting edge as the Para 2. Let me grab, oh yeah, here is the steel wheel cut jack beside the small Dorado. Here is the small Intrepid. These are both called Mini, and these are limited runs in M390. Pretty cool offering, especially if you're into the smaller blades. I would be, you know, very interested in these. What else can we bring in? Let's bring the Rat Model 1 in one more time, since most people are very familiar with that. Okay, so there are a bunch of comparisons for you, so that gives you a sense of sort of, you know, what you're dealing with in terms of size and even in terms of some, although I know there's not everyone I showed you was a true competitive option, but it was, you know, some similar, some knives that I think would fill a similar role, and you may want to consider if you're looking at a Dorado. Pretty well, by the way, every knife that I showed you, I would be more inclined to buy than these guys, just because, as I say, I can't get over the looks of this knife. I'm just not a fan. So overall, guys, you know, if you haven't figured this out by this point, you know, I do think these are less than attractive, okay? These are not knives that I consider to be really nice looking blades, and that's why you haven't seen a lot of Instagram pics, but the fact is, when I use them and carry them, I have to say I was very impressed. They cut really well. They're extremely comfortable. The blade shape, again, whether you like it or not, is very, very usable. Now, I didn't comment on sharpening because to me that's not a thing. I have no problem sharpening recurves, and probably for most of my viewers, you know, you're not gonna be using flat stones anyway. You're probably all using, you know, a Lansky rod sharpener, or a Spyderco Sharpmaker, or some other kind of fixed angle rod sharpener, and those work just fine. I mean, doesn't even, you know, recurve makes literally no difference if you're using any of those options. So I really don't have a hard time sharpening recurves, and there's really no reason to if you just have the right sharpener for the job. Okay. All of these are very well built. All of them are very, very functional tools. And if you like this design, honestly, these will serve you really, really well. They are extremely useful tools that are well built, and I really can't complain about anything in terms of construction and performance. I just don't love the way they look. Thankfully, Kizer has lots of other models that I can choose from that I do kind of like a little bit better. Thanks for watching, and we will talk to you soon. Oh wait, don't forget to like and subscribe. Fine, now we'll talk to you soon.